In the summer of 1876, the nation's fate seemed to rest on the edge of a knife. The United States Army, led by General George Armstrong Custer, had ridden out to confront a growing threat on the western frontier: Native American tribes who were defending their land, culture, and way of life. Custer's 7th Cavalry, confident in its might, faced an unexpected and devastating defeat at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. One man, Private Edward Pigford, was among the survivors who managed to live through what would come to be known as Custer's last stand. His account, as told years later, offers a rare and invaluable window into those harrowing moments. It's a story of grit, confusion, and sheer survival. Pigford was there, and his memories, filled with detail and sorrow, help us understand what happened on that fateful day and the days that followed. Edward Pigford, born in the small town of Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, was a young soldier when he enlisted in the U.S. Army. By 1876, he was a private in the 7th Cavalry. On June 25, he found himself caught up in one of the most infamous battles in American military history. The 7th Cavalry had been tasked with taking on a vastly larger force of Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors. Custer's overconfidence in the Army's superiority would soon be his downfall, but for Pigford and his comrades, it was an unfolding nightmare. The skirmishes that led up to the Battle of the Little Bighorn were chaotic and disjointed. Pigford, recalling the early moments of the engagement, speaks of confusion and the sudden loss of order. One of his first memories is of Sergeant O'Hara, a man who fought beside him on the skirmish line. The soldier was struck during the battle, and Pigford recalls O'Hara calling out, pleading for help as he lay injured. "For God's sake, don't leave me," O'Hara cried out, but there was nothing Pigford could do. The skirmish line had already begun to fall apart, and Pigford, like many others, was forced to retreat. It was a brutal scene. Men were falling fast, and there was no organized defense left to hold the line. Pigford himself only managed to fire a handful of shots before chaos overtook them. "I fired only 4 or 5 shots," he would later recall, his voice steady despite the intensity of the recollection. The Indians were everywhere, and there wasn't much we could do. As the 7th Cavalry retreated, the battle shifted in directions that none could have predicted. Pigford would witness the death of one of his comrades, Bill Meyer. Meyer was struck down by an Indian on horseback, who had followed the cavalry to the eastern side of the battlefield. At this point, the 7th Cavalry was in full retreat, and their chances of holding their ground were growing slimmer by the hour. But Pigford wasn't finished yet. He turned to face the warrior who had just killed Meyer, aiming his rifle in the Indian's direction. The warrior ducked behind a rock, momentarily disappearing from view. Pigford, keen-eyed and focused, took aim, but before he could squeeze the trigger, the Indian fired first, directing a bullet toward him. Pigford, ever the survivor, dodged the shot and kept firing back, but it was clear the tide of battle was not in their favor. After the retreat from the Valley fight on June 25, Pigford's unit was ordered to move toward the Edgerly Peaks. From that elevated position, they could get a better view of the ongoing conflict. As Pigford gazed toward the distant Custer Ridge, he saw something that stayed with him for the rest of his life. "From the Edgerly Hills, we could see the Indians gathering," Pigford said. "At first, they were firing from a wide circle, but that circle kept closing, and soon it became one large mass. The Indians were all around, like a black tide rolling up the hill. That's when I realized, Custer's men were done for." To Pigford, the scene was more than just a military engagement, it was the final moments of a tragic chapter in American history. The warriors had been patient, strategic, and relentless, a far cry from the disorganized and overconfident 7th Cavalry. Pigford's account offers a unique insight into the battlefield tactics used by the Native American forces. In a moment of reflection, he recalled an incident that seemed almost like something out of a strategy manual, one that would take a seasoned eye to truly appreciate. To draw fire from the soldiers on Reno Hill, Pigford explained, the Indians used a dummy. They put a buckskin-clad figure on a pony, tied it to the animal, and then sent the pony running over the ridge. the trick worked far better than expected. For a time, the soldiers, unsure of the ruse, kept firing at the figure, convinced they were hitting an actual enemy. It was a smart, simple move, one that showed the cunning of their opponents, who were able to make use of any advantage they could find in a dire situation. As the battle dragged on, Pigford and his comrades were tasked with guarding the perimeter. During the afternoon of June 26, while many of the men were securing water from a nearby source, Pigford spotted an Indian perched high in a tree along the western bank of the river. He raised his rifle, took aim, and fired. The Indian fell from the tree, and Pigford knew he had made the shot. Later, on June 27, when the soldiers went to retrieve the body, they found the Indian with a wound in his thigh and a broken neck. It appeared that the Indian had fallen from the tree after Pigford's shot, dying instantly when he hit the ground. It was a small victory, but in the chaos of that battle, each kill made the difference between life and death. Pigford's survival, it seemed, was a result of both skill and luck. In the wake of the battle, the 7th Cavalry was scattered, with many of its officers and men either dead or wounded. Pigford himself had been wounded in the right hip during the retreat on June 25 and later received a minor wound to his right forearm from a small-caliber bullet on June 26. Though he survived the battle, the experience left deep scars, both physical and emotional. On October 15, 1876, Pigford was discharged from the army, his service to the United States complete. He returned to his home in Pennsylvania, but the memories of the Little Bighorn followed him for the rest of his life. In 1932, Pigford recounted his experiences in an interview with O. Forrest for the Morning Observer in Washington, Pennsylvania. His account, published in a series of articles, provided valuable insight into the battle, especially regarding the tactics used by the Native American forces. Pigford, in his own words, had lived through the most intense battle of his life and came out with a unique perspective on what happened. Edward Pigford passed away on December 6, 1932, but his story remains a testament to the survival instincts and courage of the men who faced an overwhelming enemy at the Little Bighorn. It's easy to look back with hindsight and criticize the decisions made by Custer and his officers, but Pigford's account reminds us that the men who fought and died that day were not all veterans of war. They were ordinary men, thrust into an extraordinary situation. The Battle of the Little Bighorn was a turning point in the history of the American frontier, and Private Pigford's survival, despite the odds, offers a reminder of the resilience and bravery that were required to endure in a conflict where the lines between heroism and tragedy were blurred. For those who appreciate history not just for the grand narratives, but for the human stories woven into it, the tale of Edward Pigford is one of survival, sacrifice, and the harsh realities of war. It's a reminder that history, much like the land itself, is shaped not just by the victors, but by the stories of those who lived through it, carrying their memories for as long as they can.